Our next presentation from Ivana Mizina.
Good day or good evening, dear participants of the conference. 2 years ago, we have already presented the results of the work on the polar bear in this location of the Russian side of the Russian range, but it was dedicated to tagging of polar bears and the movement of tagged females along the Barents Sea water area. And now we want to present the results of the work connected with the characteristics of polar bear den locations on Franz-Joseph land with different conditions. This work has been performed on the territory of the Russian Arctic National Reserve, Franz-Joseph Land, on one of the islands, because it was accessible during the survey period. The monitoring was performed by the officials of the national park as well as the specialists of the Severtsov Research Institute of the Russian Academy of Science, starting 2014 till 2019. During different years, we had different results depending on the conditions and some other factors, but at any rate, we can have a substantial conclusion and assess the suitability of Franz-Joseph Land for denning of polar bears and assess different factors which affect the spread of these dens based on the anthropogenic or weather conditions. In general, if we take a look at the schematic of Franz-Joseph Land, then all of our dens which we found during the survey during the last 5 years are not that numerous. Franz-Joseph Land and Alexander Land is not Wrangel Island, it's different. We do not have that many dens, but still we were able to find some of them every year. Female polar bears went out from them with cubs. But the most interesting point is to take a look at the spread of the location of these dens across the territory of the island. And it turned out that most of them are on the southern slopes, steep slopes, and closer to fast ice. This is because it's much more easier for female cubs and pups to find food once they get out of their dens, because different seals are hauling out in these areas. We compared the data with the historic data available for this specific island. In 1960, there were scientific surveys on polar bears, and that data is quite interesting if we compare it to the existing data. So the middle of 20th century, at that time, polar bears chose different locations for denning. They were not concentrated on the steep slopes in the southern part of the island. Instead, they chose the places closer to the ocean, to the Arctic Ocean, in more even places, not that steep slopes. But if we take a look at the schematic, we'll be able to see that in 1960 and during the last 5 years, we see one area where polar bears stay the whole time. It's the most favorite one, southern western part, which both has steep slopes and is very close to the water area, so that it's close to food resources. And that is why we were able to define the most stable locations for maternity denning. And there was another attempt to assess how polar bears are affected by anthropogenic activity on this specific island. Because everybody knows, and there is a lot of information on the internet, video, and official footage, that there are some major stations where human activity is present, and we wanted to have another schematic which would cover the human area activity with denning areas. So if we take a look at Alexandra Land, we see the concentration here with gray. The main facilities are concentrated in this region, but their activity does not go beyond these borders. And we tried to depict these areas of human activity, anthropogenic activity rather, in kilometers, and put them on the schematic with the same radius for denning of polar bears. And we decided that this would be a very good format to see if they intersect, if they overlap or not. We wanted to see if the modern anthropogenic activity affects the placement and location of dens, as surveys demonstrated, and as you can see from this schematic, there is no real intersection, there is no real overlap between the anthropogenic activity and polar bear dens, at least on this island, at least for now. And the negative impact is minimal. Most polar bears can have their dens in the vicinity of human facilities, especially when there is a lot of snow on the island. And another thing which is very important to notice, and we should trace it in the coming years, the more, or rather, polar bears like to fall into hibernation during autumn when there is not enough snow. But if there is enough snow, then they go from the steep slopes and lay on the central part of the island where there is a lot of snow covers. And this is all I wanted to say on the current assessment of polar bear denning on one of the islands of Franz-Josef Land. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer them. Thank you. Ivan, do we have any questions to Professor Mizin? Ivan, I would like to ask you a question. The results of the survey on Franz-Josef Land, do they say that there is some kind of negative impact from the climate warming and they negatively affect the polar bear population? Maybe there were some weakened polar bears, and how often did you meet them? Answer, well, taking into account all the accumulated data on polar bear from tourists and from specialists, we have not noticed any exhausted polar bears. We don't really see, well, sometimes we see thin, so to say, polar bears, but they're not exhausted. Depending on seasons and year-round, these sightings mostly remain the same. So the data from the national park says that there is no adverse effect from the climate change, and they do not negatively affect the polar bears living on the Franz Josef Land Islands. Thank you.